stop slipping, and stop cutting your socks. We have 15 different color options between 3 grip socks and 2 sleeve types. Something for everybody at a price that just makes sense. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
While everyone's going to have their own opinion on how much this actually matters as it relates to true performance gains, if you want to feel fast in a pair of football boots, typically the best way to do that is to make them as light as possible. Where inside this box, not only do I have the lightest football boots currently available from Nike, they are the lightest football boots on the market, period. But here's the crazy part. They're not speed boots. In fact, they're not even top-end boots. It's a takedown model. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the Nike Phantom 6 Pro Low with the AG Pro stud pattern, which of course is best suited for use on artificial grass, but as you can see by its traditional design and relatively normal stud length, you can definitely get away with using this on firm natural grass, and the performance characteristics are going to be not too far off what you might get from an FG Nike Tiempo. This Pro Tier takedown model, of course, sitting below the top-end elites, football boots that would normally retail for $270. However, this retails for $100 less at $170. Oh, and they're also very randomly the lightest football boots on the market by far. Where let's just get right to it, let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Where this is the F50 Plus from Adidas, version 2 with the thinner upper and of course the lacing system. It retails for $300, nearly double the price of the Phantom 6 Pro Low, and it is what I thought was the lightest football boot on the market. And then of course we have the Phantom 6 Pro Low with the AG Pro stud pattern, both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the F50 Plus, and you can see that they weigh in at a very lightweight 6.6 ounces, the equivalent of 187 grams. Remember those numbers, and we'll throw on the AG Pro Phantom 6 Pro Low on the scale, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.2 ounces, the equivalent of 175 grams. And not to glance over the FG version of the Phantom 6 Pro, because I did mention this in my review as well, but similar to the Elite models, the AG Pro version, for whatever reason, is just that couple grams lighter. Nonetheless, in the same size, 9.5 US, the FG version of the Phantom 6 Pro weighs in at 176 grams. So basically 1 gram more than the AG Pro variation, which is pretty insignificant, and basically meaning that if you want the lightest football boots on the market, you shouldn't spend $300 on an F50 Plus, but instead $170 on a takedown model of a control boot from Nike. Where I get it, 12 grams might not sound like a lot of weight, but when you're shaving 10 plus grams off a design that already feels pretty much weightless on feet, you end up with a pair of football boots that's pretty much as close as we've been to F50 Adizero territory pretty well since the 2016 Vapor 11 maybe? Where aside from these boots randomly being the lightest ones on the market by far, the Phantom 6 Pro as a platform is actually really solid, and I posted a very detailed review of the FG variation in both the low cut and high cut versions on the channel a little over a week ago. So if you want the most complete breakdown of what this boot is all about, definitely go check that out. But for the sake of this video, aside from highlighting the ridiculous weight of this product, I do want to talk about the changes that they have made for the AG Pro variation, which for a lot of people, especially if you're not a fan of that Cyclone 360 bladed stud setup on the FG model, the AG Pro version might be the one to go for. So if you're interested in learning more, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick these up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the first link down below. And really quickly, before we keep going, if you enjoy seeing reviews of takedown models, don't forget to drop a like on this video. And if you appreciate the unsugar-coated, unsponsored, brutally honest opinions on this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. Now you're probably asking yourself, given how similar the Phantom 6 Pro design appears to be when compared to the top-end Elite, why on earth is it so much lighter? And I think the answer to that question really boils down to the fact that the Phantom 6 Pro, while I don't necessarily want to call the materials cheap compared to the Elites, they're very thin and very lightweight, certainly a lot less structured, and when you combine all of those elements together to create a final product, whether Nike meant to or not, they've come up with what is a ridiculously lightweight pair of football boots. These not only being significantly lighter than the top-end Phantom 6 Elites, but even the top-end Nike Mercurial models, where instead of grip knit, the upper is made from a material called Venom Skin, which is basically a thin layer of mesh as your base. You have some ridge texturing on the surface to give it the same general appearance as the grip knit upper of the Elite, where that texture is kind of worked into the material itself. You have your grip texture on the surface that provides just as much, if not more, grip than what you're going to find from the grip knit on the top end model. So from a control perspective, if having that extra grip on the ball is super important to you, you're not missing out on that signature element with the Phantom 6 Pro compared to the top end model. And then the inside lining material is definitely a little bit cheaper feeling than what you'll find on the top end model, in that it is kind of just a thin nylon, and the end result is a material that is super pliable and very sock-like in terms of feel. However, it's definitely lacking in structure and I'd argue security when compared to the top model, which in general just makes this feel a little bit flimsier on feet, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I guess without beating around the bush, while there are a lot of similar elements to that top end Elite model, the Pros in comparison definitely feel a little bit stripped down. On the low cut variant in particular, you still get that kind of hooded design across the bottom part of the lacing system, and you'll find across the top of the foot, it's made from a very similar fly knit material, giving you that one piece enclosure like you'll find on the $270 Elites, with the laces being pushed slightly to the outside, giving you a nice secure fit when they're tied tight. Moving to the back, you're going to find that you have a low cut design on the low with a mid cut design on the highs, of course. The high cut version also giving you that lace cover if that's your cup of tea. Again, when you're talking about the lightest boot on the market, technically the lows are lighter just because there is less material, but I really don't think those couple extra grams from the high are necessarily going to slow you down. Internally, you have a structure at the back of the heel, but it's more so down low because at the very back, you can see it's very, very flexible, which I think makes for great overall comfort and very little break-in time, in that the heel can kind of just adjust to the shape of your feet the second that you slide the boots on. The heel lining material is also similar to what you'll find on the top end model. Plenty of padding and this soft microfiber liner, which just feels really good against your heel and also grips your socks pretty nicely. And the insole, fully removable, definitely on the cheaper side, just features a mesh liner on top, and it's made from a single layer of this Ortholite style foam that is definitely on the thinner side, but as far as takedown model insoles go, it's kind of par for the course. And then there's the AG Pro sole plate and stud pattern, which from a sole plate perspective is pretty much the same as what you're going to find on the FG version. I really don't think it ends up feeling that different when you have the boots on feet. The stud pattern, however, is different and is obviously going to be way better suited for use on artificial grass. But like I talked about earlier in the video, it's also not dissimilar to a Tiempo FG stud pattern, meaning that you can definitely get away with using these on firm natural grass. In fact, when Neymar was still signed with Nike, he was wearing Mercurials with the AG Pro stud pattern simply because of the preference that he seemed to have towards conical studs rather than blades. When it comes to the fit and feel on feet of the Phantom 6 Pro, given that they're effectively weightless, they don't necessarily have that harsh, stiff, almost brutally thin sensation that I think most people would expect a very lightweight football boot to have. In other words, they have a speed boot-esque feel to them in the sense that the upper is quite thin, but for the most part, the sole plate and the upper is just very flexible. It moves very nicely with your feet. It's pliable, and if anything, I'd describe the upper as having more of a sock-like feel rather than a raw, barefoot, kind of rigid synthetic one, where if you could make one criticism of this boot outside of the comfort aspect of this upper, however, is that maybe it's lacking a little bit of structure, especially when compared to the Elites, where I wouldn't necessarily say that they are more comfortable than the top end model, but certainly they don't necessarily feel as premium on your feet. They're comfortable in, dare I say, the cheapest way possible, and that the materials are just very thin and relatively unstructured. Nonetheless, with the laces tied tight, it's got the same general shape as the top end Phantom 6 Elite, meaning that they fit extremely well and definitely have some really good width to them. Again, another characteristic not commonly associated with super lightweight speed boots. They tend to have a little bit of a slimmer profile, whereas the Phantom 6 is by far the widest football boot currently on offer from Nike, where I do think that these will legitimately work well for most people, even if you do have wide feet. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So like a lot of Nike products, if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. Where in conclusion, even though I do think 170 or even 180 in the case of the highs is a lot to pay for a takedown model, the feel and performance characteristics are definitely there. Where as far as pro tier takedown models go, these just share a lot in common as far as base performance characteristics to what you'll get on the much more expensive Elite variation. But outside of all of that, and arguably the biggest appeal of this football boot is going to be the objective fact that it is the lightest football boot on the market by quite a significant margin. Where if you miss that weightless feel of the early days of the Adidas F50 Adizero, you can get that feeling again for well under $200. If this isn't proof that you shouldn't just believe the marketing, then I don't know what is.